Some journalists covering the violence in Gaza are finding themselves in the middle of the Israeli bombings. Now they are becoming part of the story. Some media outlets claim reporters were the targets. Others say Hamas militants were using journalists as human shields. Let's talk about that and the bigger picture of what is going on there and how it's being covered with Judith Miller, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter who has spent a great deal of time in the Middle East. She's also a Fox News contributor. Bret Stephens is a foreign affairs columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Previously, he was editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. So there were these attacks on the media building, Israeli attacks on the media building. Hamas says, oh, you're going after civilians, you're attacking reporters here. What do you make of that?
Well, there was one reporter who apparently was injured who worked for Al-Aqsa Media, which is a branch of Hamas. So it's hard to call him a journalist when he's working for a terrorist organization. Then there is a building, I've been to it, in Gaza where a lot of the foreign press operate. But it's also indisputably the case that Hamas has been making every effort to use every kind of human shield at its disposal. And you see it with pictures of rockets being fired from downtown Gaza City, just blocks away, if not closer, to the central hospital of Gaza City.
So they are trying, in your view, they're trying to bring attacks that are going to injure or kill media people so that they can proclaim to the world the Israelis are barbarians.
Right, exactly, because every civilian death, and this is the tragedy of Palestinian governance right now, every civilian death for them is being treated as a propaganda tool against Israel. And so they're, in fact, inviting those very civilian deaths.
The Israelis, Judy, did send out warnings via Twitter, and we have them as they came out. A warning to reporters in Gaza, stay away from Hamas operatives and facilities. Hamas, a terrorist group, will use you as human shields. And then it says, minutes ago, we surgically targeted a Hamas intelligence operations center on the 7th floor of a media building in Gaza. Direct hit confirmed. And it goes on to say the Hamas terrorists weren't in the media building to be interviewed. They were there to communicate with field operatives and plan attacks. They say they're giving fair warning.
Well, they are, and they have. And they, as Bret said, they have repeatedly warned journalists to stay away from areas that are controlled by Hamas. Now, it's very hard for journalists to sometimes know what's going on. And there was one floor of a building that was clearly of concern to the Israelis. They delivered a strike at that building. One journalist who was part of the apparatus, part of the Hamas media machine, was injured, but the others were not. And Sam Kiley of Sky News, who was also in the building, said he had no reason not to believe the I.D.F. spokesman.
Interesting, Bret, a take on this that we don't hear about is the reporting coming out of Gaza, which apparently is saying, oh, we are raining rockets down on Israel, they're running they're cowering in fear, and we are winning this battle, essentially.
Well, it's not entirely wrong. Let me stress that, because for Hamas and for any terrorist or guerrilla organization, not losing is winning. And what they want to do, what they're really aiming for isn't a military victory. They're aiming for a kind of political victory against Israel in which they're seen raining rockets on Israel and not suffering a decisive consequence. If there's a ceasefire, that's what they're going to get.
They want to get the blockade lifted.
Right. Exactly. This was the same standard of Hezbollah. When Hezbollah announced after the Israelis invaded that they had survived and therefore they had triumphed. This is a standard line, and it's one they happen to believe.
But they are stretching the truth incredibly. Some of what I have said is true. Obviously, Israelis in southern Israel are living in fear of these rocket attacks, but they are pretending that they are far more successful and far more destructive than they've actually been.
Well, in a military sense, you're absolutely right. The number of Israeli casualties is low. On the other hand, you have 1 million Israelis living in bunkers. And if this war comes to an end without Hamas in some way being decisively defeated, you can count my words, this will be repeated in the not-too-distant future.
In the meantime, we have this ceasefire scheduled to go into effect an hour and a half from now. Secretary Clinton has appeared publicly with the Egyptian leadership to suggest that this thing is real. What are the hopes?
Well, I think we'll have to see whether or not it's real. I mean, the Israelis absolutely need to see that Hamas is able to stop the rocket attacks that have sent 1 million Israelis into fallout shelters. They have to be able to determine that, in fact, more of the Fajr 5 missile parts are not going to be smuggled into the Gaza Strip as they have been routinely, and especially even more so since President Morsi became president of Egypt under the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a very difficult moment for Israel and for its neighbors.
You know, I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu right after the last ceasefire was declared in 2009, and he was unequivocal. He said, unless we have a situation in which Hamas is no longer able to import these rockets, we will have achieved nothing. Now he's prime minister, and we're going to see if he's not going to commit the very blunder he warned against just a few years ago.
Bret Stephens, formerly with the Jerusalem Post and now at the Wall Street Journal. Judy Miller, writer and a Fox News contributor. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And our